Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our reading of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. I am reading this book to you word by word. I've skipped only one chapter, which is now entered into the lore of this channel as the missing chapter. I've put out a call already because we are more than halfway through with the book. I've put out a call already for what our next book will be. I want to read to you, as long as you're okay with my copious interruptions, and you have been, then I want to read to you from now until you're old and gray. I don't have a clear winner for that. I don't know that I was asking for a clear winner. I will end up picking the book myself. But we are embroiled in the story, basically, of two families. The Scarborough family, headed by sick, dying old Mr. Scarborough of the title, who is a wealthy landowner. He owns a property named Tretton Park that is very valuable and getting more valuable. And his two sons, Mountjoy, the eldest, and Augustus, the younger. And Mr. Scarborough has seen the mountain of debts that his eldest son, a gambling addict, has raised against inheriting the property, and has decided to declare to the world that Mountjoy is illegitimate, and to prove it with documents. Mrs. Scarborough is dead, so the documents have to speak for themselves, and they do. The family lawyer, Mr. Gray, says there is no doubt that he was going to let his illegitimate son inherit the property. It's not going to happen anymore. The property is now devolved to Augustus Scarborough, who is now legally the eldest son and heir to Tretton Park, but who is odious. He's loathsome. Captain Mountjoy is not all that much to write home about, but at least he has honest feeling, and Augustus has none. So that's the Scarborough family, aside from old Mr. Scarborough's sister, who, like so many side characters in Trollope, really deserves at least a long short story of her own. But the other family is the Ainsley family, because Trollope has nominated someone as the hero of this book, Harry Ainsley, young Harry Ainsley, a handsome young man with wavy hair who is in love with Captain Scarborough's first cousin, Florence Mountjoy, who had once been more or less intended by the family for Captain Mountjoy. Harry Ainsley loves Florence Mountjoy, and he thinks that he's in a position to woo her, and actually gets her consent. She's been in love with him forever. They have now declared that to each other. And the reason why Harry Ainsley thinks, keep in mind this is the 1880s, the reason why he thinks that he has the right to have a marriage is because he thinks at first that his place in the world is secure. His uncle, Uncle Prosper, is not married, has no children, and is intending to entail his property, minor property, not anywhere near as wealthy as Tretton Park, to Harry. Harry is his heir. To the extent that he has told the younger Harry, going into school, that you need not study for a profession because you won't be earning your own keep. You will be the master of Buston, the state and the country there. Won't allow him to do much. Buston is not all that big a thing, but he would be an independent person. He wouldn't need to earn his bread. Not only has he been told that you will be my heir, you will inherit, but he's been given an allowance. A small allowance, but an allowance. Enough money for a frugal young man to live on without needing to do a thing. That's been Harry's whole life, is that world. But recently, he has kicked against the traces when it comes to his uncle. His uncle is a horrible person, an idiot, and also a petty tyrant. And Harry has not liked that. Obviously, no young man would like that. But in addition to that, there was an unfortunate incident in the city when Mountjoy Scarborough learns from Florence Mountjoy that she actually loves Harry Ainsley, and they know each other. The Scarborough brothers and Harry Ainsley have known each other for years. When he learns that, he's furious, and when they then meet late at night on a side street with no one around, they come to blows. And Harry knocks Captain Scarborough down and leaves him unconscious and walks away. Now, Captain Scarborough goes missing for a while after that, and there's all sorts of talk, including with the police, that he might be dead, that he might have been murdered. No one seriously thinks that for very long. If you think about that, you need, as everybody points out, including Harry himself, justifying the fact that he doesn't go to the police, he justifies that by saying, well, if a man were unconscious, that would be one thing, but if a man were dead, well, somebody has to get rid of the body. There have to be people involved. There's no way you could keep that secret in the middle of a teeming metropolis. There's no way that you could keep that secret. So people don't for long think that Mountjoy is dead. But there's one person who knows perfectly well that Mountjoy is not dead, and that's his brother Augustus, because the minute Mountjoy regains his senses, he staggers to his brother's house. and has been living under his brother's care, and the brother has not told anyone. But the brother has told the story of the meeting between Harry and Captain Mountjoy. He spread that story around intentionally to destroy Harry's reputation. And it has worked better than his wildest dreams, because the person it's worked most on is Uncle Prosper, who has heard that story and decided not only to stop Harry's allowance, but also to disinherit him by going a-courting, by getting a wife and having a son. If Uncle Prosper has a son, well, the entail of the property goes to the son. And Harry is literally out from everything. So no more prospects of marriage. No more prospects of anything. Not only does he not have an income, and not only does he not have prospects of inheriting, but he also has no training of any kind to make a living in any way. He'd have to work at a grocer's stop. So those two families are governing this book. There are others, but those two are. And they are now intersecting. Because old Mr. Scarborough has wheels within wheels and has sent off a barrage of letters. He sent a letter to his lawyer, Mr. Gray, telling him to come down to Tretton Park because there's legal business between them. But he also sent letters to Captain Scarborough and to Harry Annesley telling them to come and visit, and they both did at the same time. And shook hands and let bygones be bygones. Captain Mountjoy apologized for accosting Harry in the street. I don't know that when we last saw them they were friends, but they're not enemies anymore. That part is over. Rather remarkable. And when Harry talks with old Mr. Scarborough discloses something of the reason why he wants Harry down at Tretton Park, which is that he's heard the story about Harry's uncle and wants to make it right. He is going to send a letter to Uncle Prosper telling him that he is completely wrong and that if he takes any information from Augustus Scarborough at face value, he's a fool. But he's going to do something else too, something even more remarkable. He's going to ask Mountjoy to go to Buston and tell Uncle Prosper that story himself, the man who is directly involved. And Trollope doesn't waste any time. He brings us right to that interview. So this is chapter 41, which is called Mountjoy Scarborough Goes to Buston. Mr. Gray, that's the lawyer, keep in mind, returned to London after staying but one night, having received fresh instructions as to the will. The will was to be prepared at once, and Mr. Barry was to bring it down for execution. "Shall I not inform Augustus?" said Mr. Gray. But this did not suit with Mr. Scarborough's view of revenge. He's not even going to tell his younger son the terms of his new will. "I think not. I would do by him whatever honesty requires, but I have never told him what I mean that I mean to leave him anything. Of course he knows that he is to have the estate. He is reveling in the future poverty of poor Mountjoy. He turned him out of his house just now because Mountjoy would not obey him and go to, was it Brazil? He would turn him out of his house if he could, because he knows I won't go at once to the devil," meaning die. "He is something over-masterful, is Master Augustus, and a rub or two will do him good. I'd rather you wouldn't tell him, if you please." Then Mr. Gray departed without making any promise, but he determined that he would be guided by the squire's wishes. Augustus Scarborough was not of nature to excite very warmly the charity of any man. Uh-oh. What's going on back there? Huh? What are you doing? Are you going to make your trek to the chair? You are. You're going to make your trek to the chair. You can do it. There you go. Here, let me clear this off because you're going to be coming back here in a minute. Come here. Come here. There you go. That's the absolute boomerang effect. You don't want to be over there at all. There you go, baby. There you go. All right, let's get back to now that the sideshow is over, let's get back. What the point that the narrator is making there is that if Mr. Gray liked Augustus Scarborough, maybe he would warn him that he's going to inherit the four walls of a building and nothing else from his father. But nobody likes Augustus, so he doesn't feel compelled to warn him. Harry remained for 2 or 3 days shooting with Mountjoy, and once or twice he saw the squire again. So they've been spending time together, out shooting innocent animals that never hurt them, and also presumably eating. "Merton and I have managed to concoct that letter," said the squire. "I'm afraid your uncle will find it rather long. Is he impatient of long letters?" "Well, he likes long sermons." If anybody would listen to his reading, I think you have... If anybody will listen to his reading, said, this is Mr. Scarborough talking, "I think you have a deal to answer for yourself when you could have made so small a sacrifice to a man whom you were to owe everything. But he ought to look for a wife, in consequence of that crime, and not falsely allege another. If, as I fear, he finds the wife plan troublesome, our letter may perhaps move him, and Mountjoy is to go down and open his eyes. Mountjoy hasn't made any difficulty about it. Mountjoy has been asked to go there and doesn't mind at all the idea. Of course, I'll go down to Buston and talk to this man, tell him what happened, because Mountjoy doesn't have any of the negative qualities that his brother does. Baby, come over here. There you go. How many times are you going to do this, baby girl? There you go. Just settle in and make yourself comfortable. Make you comfortable. There you go. There you go. All right, let's try this again. Somebody is a little restless. Baby. Oh. There you go. A professional YouTuber would cut and start this over, but you all like to see freedom more than you like to hear from me anyway. So let's get on with the story here. We'll try to get to the end of it if Her Highness has finished running around. I shall be greatly distressed, Harry began. Not at all. He must go. I like to have my own way in these little matters. He owes you as much reparation as that, and we shall be able to see what members of the Scarborough family you would trust the most. Harry, during the 2 days, shot some hares in the company of Mountjoy, but not a word more was said about the adventure in London, meaning the fact that they fought in London. Nor was the name of Florence Mountjoy ever mentioned between the two suitors. I'm going to Buston, you know, Mountjoy said once. So your father told me. What sort of a fellow shall I find your uncle? He's a gentleman, but not very wise. No one can say anything positive of our Uncle Prosper. No one can. No more was said between them on that head, but Mountjoy spoke at great length about his own brother and his father's will. My father is the most singular man you ever came across. I think he is. I am not going to say a word for him. I wouldn't let him think that I had said a good word for him. In order to save the property, he has maligned my mother and has cheated me and the creditors most horribly, most infernally. That's my conviction, though Gray thinks otherwise. I can't forgive him, and won't, and he knows it. But after that, he is going to do the best thing for me he can. And he has begun by making me a decent allowance again as his son. But I'm to have that as long as I remain here at Tretton. Of course, I have been fond of cards. I suppose so. Not a doubt of it. But I haven't touched a card now for a month, nearly, and then he is going to leave me what property he has to leave, and he and my brother have paid off those Jews among them. I'm not a bit obliged to my brother. He's got some game of his own which I don't quite clearly see, and my father's doing this for me simply to spite my brother. He'd cut down every tree upon the place if Gray would allow it, and yet to give Augustus the property my father has done this gross injustice. I suppose the moneylenders would have had the best of it if he'd not? Harry doesn't have to say this, but it is true. Mountjoy is talking as if his father hadn't done this, he would inherit Tretton Park. He will not. He would not have inherited it. Although the whole of the money that could be realized by the place for 10 years was in the hands of moneylenders. That's true. They would have had it all. They had measured every yard of it and had got my name down for the full value. Now they're paid. That's a comfort. Nothing's a comfort. I know that they are right, and that if I got the money into my own hand, it would be gone tomorrow. I should be off to Monte Carlo like a shot, and of course it would go after the other. There's but one thing that would redeem me. What's that? Never mind. We won't talk of it. Then he was silent, but Harry Annesley knew very well that he had alluded to Florence Mountjoy, because Mountjoy Scarborough has maintained that if Florence were his wife, he would live a straight life. He would not endanger her at all. He would not inconvenience her. But a system with the realization of the property that he is about to get, £30,000, could be made that doesn't involve a wife, that just involves him getting a regular allowance with ironclad rules that is not to be advanced or increased at all. And B, he's already lived for a month without gambling. So if he can do that, why can't he do it for a little longer or a lot longer? Then Harry went, and Mountjoy was left to the companionship of Mr. Merton, and such pleasures as he could find in the daily visit to his father. He was at any rate courteous in his old manner to the old man, and abstained from those irritating speeches which Augustus had always chosen to make. He had on one occasion during this visit told his father what he thought about him, but this the squire had taken quite as a compliment. I believe you know that you've done a monstrous injustice to everybody concerned. I rather like doing what you call injustices. You have set the law at defiance. Well, yes, I think I have done that. According to my belief, it's all untrue. You mean about your mother? I like that for you. I do indeed. I like you for sticking up for your poor mother. Well, now we shall have £50 a month, and say, now you shall have £50 a month, say £12.10 a week as long as you remain at Tretton, and you may have whom you like here as long as they bring no cards with them. And if you want to hunt, there are horses, and if they ain't good enough, you can get others. But if you go away from Tretton, there's an end of it. It will all be stopped the next day. Nevertheless, he did make arrangements by which Mountjoy should proceed to Buston, stopping 2 nights as he went in London. There isn't a club he can enter, said the squire, comforting himself, nor a Jew that will lend him a £5 note. He doesn't think that Mountjoy can get into much trouble with a 2-day stopover in London from gambling, because no one will lend him money. He's a ruined man, a nobody, as he puts it. Mountjoy had told the truth when he said that was nothing of a comfort. Though it seemed to his father and to the people around him at Tretton that he was everything a man could want, he had in fact nothing that could satisfy him. In the first place, he was quite alive to the misery of that decision given by the world against him, which had been of such comfort to his father. Not a club in London would admit him. He had been proclaimed a defaulter after such a fashion that all his clubs had sent to him for some explanation, and as he had given none, and had not answered their letters, his name had been crossed out of the books of them all. He knew himself to be a man disgraced, and when he fled from London he had gone under the conviction that he would certainly never return. There were the pistol and bullet as his last assured resource, but a certain amount of good fortune had awaited him, enough to save him from having recourse to their aid. His brother had supplied him with small sums of money, and from time to time a morsel of good luck had enabled him to gamble, not to his heart's content, but in some manner so as to make life bearable. But now he was back in his own country, and he could gamble not at all, and hardly even see those old companions with whom he had lived. It was not only for the card tables that he sighed, but for the companions of the card table. And though he knew that he had been scratched out of the lists of all the clubs as a dishonest man, he knew also, or thought he knew, that he had been as honest as the best of those companions. As long as he could by any possibility raise money, he had paid it away, and by no false trick had he ever endeavored to get it back again. Had a little time been allowed him, all would have been paid, all that had been paid. He knew that by rules of such institutions time could not be granted, but still he did not feel himself to have been a dishonest man. Yet he had been so disgraced that he could hardly venture to walk about the streets of London in the daylight. And then there came upon him, when he found himself alone at Tretton, an irrepressible desire for gambling, because he's an addict. But that's an awful feeling that he must have, that in daylight people are pointing at him. They know who he is. It was as though his throat were parched with an implacable thirst. He walked about ever meditating certain fortunate turns of the cards, and when he had worked himself up to some realization of his old excitement, he would remember that it was all a vain and empty bubble. He had money in his pocket, and could rush up to London if he would, but if he did so, he could no doubt find some coarse hell at which he could stake it all, and would all be gone. But the gates of A and B and C would be closed against him, and he would then be driven to feel that he had indeed fallen into the nethermost pit. Were he once to play at such places as his mind painted to him, he could never play at any other. At gambling hells, in other words. Absolutely coarse gambling dens would be available to him in London, but nothing would be available to him after that. That's the bottom. And yet, when the day drew nigh on which he was to go to London on his way to Buston, he did bethink himself where these places were to be found. His throat was parched, and the thirst upon him was extreme. Cards were the weapon he had used. He had played piquet and whist and baccarat with an occasional night at some foolish game such as cribbage. Who in their right mind would play cribbage? Though he had always lost, he had always played with men who had played honestly. There is much that is in truth dishonest, even in honest play. A man who can keep himself sober after dinner plays with one who flushes himself with drink. A man who with a trained memory plays with him who cannot remember a card. The cool man plays with the impetuous, the man who can hold his tongue with him who cannot but talk, the man whose practised face will tell no secrets with him who loses a point every rubber by his uncontrolled grimaces. It's not the same thing. Of course, not everybody is the same, but that's not the same thing as gambling away your whole patrimony. And then there is the man who knows the game and plays with him who knows it not at all. Of course, the cool, collected, the thoughtful, the practiced, they who have given up their whole souls to the study of cards, will play at great advantage, which in their calculations they do not fail to recognize. See a man standing by and watching the table and laying all the bets he can on A and B against C and D, and however ignorant you may be, you will soon become sure that A and B know the game, whereas C and D are simply infants. That is all fair and acknowledged, but looking at it from a distance as you lie under your apple trees in your orchard, far from the shout of 2 by honors, you will come to doubt the honesty of making your income after such a fashion. Those of us who are not addicts, those of us who do not feel this parching thirst, would think this is the most self-evident thing in the world. Tretton has apparently orchard. It has orchards. It has peace. It has horses and stables. It has countryside. It has a lovely house with meals provided. Probably a library. Most of us who are reading this book, if given that for no other charge than simply being there and not gambling, would never think of going to those gambling hells in London. Would never think of it. Trollope is aware of the fact that, to a large extent, Captain Mountjoy has no choice. Such as it is, Mountjoy sighed for it bitterly, but could not see where it was to be found. He had a gentleman's horror of those resorts in gin shops, or kept by the disciples of gin shops, where he should surely be robbed, which did not appall him, but robbed in bad company. Thinking of all this, he went up to London late in the afternoon and spent an uncomfortable evening in town. It was absolutely innocent as regards to the doings of the night itself, but was terrible to him. There was a slow, drizzling rain, and not less after dinner at his hotel he started off to wander through the streets. That's a mistake. For Pete's sake, that's a mistake. Don't put yourself in the way of temptation. Sit and read. Sit and read. With his greatcoat and his umbrella, he was almost hidden, and as he passed through Pall Mall and up St. James Street and along Piccadilly, he could pause and look in at the accustomed door. He saw men entering whom he knew, and knew that within 5 minutes they could be seated at their tables. "I had an awfully heavy time of it last night," one said to another as he went up the steps, and Mountjoy, as he heard the words, envied the speaker. Then he passed back and went again on a tour of all the clubs. What had he done that he, like a poor Peri, should be unable to enter the gates of all these paradises? He had now in his pocket £50. Could he have lost more? Could he have been made absolutely certain that he would have lost it, he would have gone into any of those paradises and staked his money with certainty. At last, having turned up at Waterloo Place, he saw a man standing in the doorway of one of those palaces, and he was aware at once that the man had seen him. He was a man of such a nature that it would be impossible that he should have seen a worse. He was a small, dry, good-looking little fellow with a carefully preserved mustache and a head from the top of which age was beginning to move the hair. He lived by cards, and lived well. He was called Captain Vignoles, but it was only known of him that he was a professional gambler. He probably never cheated. Men who play at clubs scarcely ever cheat. There are so many with whom they play sharp enough to discover them, and with a discovered gambler, all in this world is over. Many scenes come to mind from various movies. Captain Vignoles never cheated, but he found that in obedience to these little rules which I have named above stood him in lieu of cheating. Yeah, all that Trollope said is true. If you're a professional at it, you're going to be better than the amateurs around you. But to make it your living. He was not known to have any particular income, but he was known to live on the best of everything as far as club life was concerned. He immediately followed Mountjoy down into the street and greeted him. "Captain Scarborough, as I am a living man." "Well, Vignoles, how are you?" "And so you have come back once more to the land of the living. I was awfully sorry for you, and think that they treated you uncommonly harshly. As you paid your money, of course they'll let you in again." All the world knows that, although Mountjoy is still blacklisted from all these clubs, all the world knows that Tretton Park is now debt-free. Although he's not the heir of it, so why that should make a difference. In answer to this, Mountjoy had very little to say, but the interview ended by him accepting an invitation from Captain Vignoles to supper for the following evening. If Captain Scarborough would come at 11 o'clock, Captain Vignoles would ask a few fellows to meet with him, and they would have just a rubber of whist. Oh, don't do it. You'll lose all your money. Don't do it. Mountjoy knew well the nature of the man who asked him, and understood perfectly what would be the result. But there thrilled through his bosom as he accepted the invitation a sense of joy which he could hardly himself understand. On the following morning, Mountjoy was up for him very early, and taking by a return ticket, went down to Buston. He had written to Mr. Prosper, sending his compliments, saying that he would do himself the honour of calling at a certain hour. At the hour named, he drove up to Buston Hall in a fly from Buntington Station, and was told by Matthew, the old butler, that his master was at home. If Captain Mountjoy would step into the drawing-room, Mr. Prosper should be informed. Mountjoy did as he was bidden, and after half an hour he was joined by Mr. Prosper. "You have received a letter from my father," he began by saying. You might think, if you begin by saying that, "I think you got a letter from my father," then you're being a little abrupt. He was kept waiting for half an hour by a man who never leaves his house. So, yeah, go ahead and be abrupt. Uncle Prosper is not a favorite of mine, in case you were wondering. "A very long letter," said the Squire of Buston. "I dare say. I did not see it, and have, in fact, very little to say as to its contents. I do not know, indeed, what they were, and neither do we. We want to see that letter." "The letter refers to my nephew, Mr. Harry Ainsley." "I suppose so. What I have to say refers to Mr. Ainsley, too." "You are very kind, very kind. I don't know about that, but I have come altogether at my father's instance, and I think, indeed, that in fairness I ought to tell you the truth as to what took place between me and your nephew." "You are very good, but your father has already given me his account, and I suppose yours. I don't know what my father may have done, but I think that you ought to desire to hear from my own lips the account of the transaction. An untrue account has been told to you." "I have heard it from your own brother." "An untrue account has been told to you. I attacked your nephew." "What made you do that?" said the squire. "That has nothing to do with it, but I did. I understood all that before, but you didn't understand that Mr. Ainsley behaved perfectly well in all that occurred." "Did he tell a lie about it afterwards?" "My brother no doubt lured him on to make an untrue statement." "A lie!" You want to wrap this guy in the head. Yeah, well, we've seen him tell a dozen lies just in this story. It's such a stupid little point to hang everything on just because Harry wouldn't listen to sermons. You may call it so if you will. If you think that Augustus was to have it all his own way, I disagree with you altogether. In point of fact, your nephew behaved through the whole thing in a manner as well a man could. Practically, he told no lie at all. He did just what a man ought to do, and anything that you have heard to the contrary is calumnious and false. As I am told that you have been led by my brother's statement to disinherit your nephew, I have done nothing of the kind. I am very glad to hear it. He has not at any rate deserved it, and I felt it my duty to come and tell you. This is awfully good of Mountjoy. You have to give him that. It's awfully good of him. He's not just saying that he attacked Harry. He's saying that Harry has done everything right. That's awfully good. There's no ego in that at all." Then Mountjoy retired, not without hospitality, having been coldly offered by Mr. Prosper, and went back to Buntingford and to London. Now at last would come, he said to himself through the whole of the afternoon, now at last would come a repetition of those joys for which his soul had sighed so eagerly. Captain Vignola is going to lead him into sin. But there we have it. That is the chapter, and that is as much as can possibly be done with Uncle Prosper. Not only has Augustus Scarborough's father written to the man and told him, "My son is a liar. Anything you say by him, any guidance you take from him, would be foolish. It would be wrong." Not only that, but the man himself, the man who was involved, the man who was the talk of 10 days in London, the man who disappeared, the man who was supposed to be murdered, went in person down to Buston and told the squire, "I attacked your nephew. He did nothing wrong." Your Augustus Scarborough led him on to speak a minor untruth, a lie. He led him on to do that Harry is innocent. So what kind of an effect is this going to have? Well, Trollope, the storyteller, now has basically two choices that he can take at this point in his narrative. We're totally hooked into the main story. So one of the choices that Trollope has would be flat out the wrong one, which would be to shift the scene. And I'm not saying that as if he would find it unthinkable. In other great novels of his, he does shift the scene at just the wrong time, when you can just look at it as a reader, much less a writer, and say, no, that's a bad mistake. He could shift the scene to Florence Mountjoy. Could anything in Brussels, could the pining of Mr. Anderson have any claim to interest next to all this? That would be a bad mistake. So he has two choices here. He can either follow Captain Mountjoy, or he can let us know immediately the effects of this visit down at Buston. And I think we know what he's going to do. So we'll pick this up in the next chapter, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.